This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X.
You're listening to Planet X.
Planet X. This is Planet X. Planet X.
Broadcasting to you from the studios of Planet X, this is the Tony Topping Show. It's Tuesday at 8 p.m. It's the Tony Topping Show. I am Tony Topping. I am a paranormal Jason Bourne. Very interesting goings-on in the world of the media. Certainly very interesting goings-on to do with Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian and Mr. Snowden and the release of all the secret files there that are going on, and Louise Mensch on Newsnight discussing all this. And I watch with interest these developments, I certainly do, because there is a lot going on from my little world. Certainly a lot going on in watching all this, to do with the fact that there is certainly a secret world of intelligence gathering and eavesdropping. And, I think Edward Snowden had the lofty ideal of trying to stop a shadow empire from being built around us that intrudes into our daily lives. Certainly, from where I'm sat, it goes beyond electronic intrusion via computers. Think again, if you thought that there was, that they were tapping phones, etc., which they are doing, that goes on quite routinely, and the tapping of emails in the prevention of terrorism, etc., that does go on. However, there is another level to all this that is out of the public domain that I find very disturbing that has happened to me. And we've got to draw a distinction, if any smart ass in the media pipes up about this. We've got to draw a distinction between somebody like me coming out and saying I've been targeted, and then somebody else saying, well, I was targeted by the spies and stuff like that, because it doesn't quite work like that. It's as John le Carre says in his book, it's a very, very different world. The world of, let us say, the field officer on the ground following a terrorist with a rucksack on his back, or following a target, is high stakes, high pressure. It's very real. It does happen. It does go on. And that's a very different viewpoint from my world and what I've witnessed, where I was overtly followed by some goon squad. That what is troubling about all that is I got the phone calls and I got followed, etc. What is troubling about that is the fact that there is no accountability or oversight with these individuals, and that is quite worrying. I find that quite worrying. And our security services in the UK are probably quite small compared to that of other nations. So what I talk about is a very different world from, so I say, the field officer on 29,000 a year. John le Carre reflected, I know, on a YouTube video that a field officer is a high pressure employment. It's certainly not a nice job to do, and you've got to get a sense of balance before we start going into what I'm talking about. Now, I speak at conferences regarding my experiences, dear listener, and one of my subjects is paranormal espionage. I've had to study that. It's a very unique field because I needed to understand what was going on with me. And, people will wander over, they'll chat, they'll say that they were involved in this and that and the other on behalf of the government. and that certain government departments have to hit the kill switch on their networks due to cyber attacks from China. China, for example, China and other foreign powers do have cyber threats that do go for the United Kingdom for the jugular. And there's, I was told on the QT that a certain, Whitehall or whatever you want to call it would hit the kill switch because they had them coming in. It's very interesting to note at long last that the UK IT infrastructure by a certain company had links to Chinese state security. And that's very interesting, because if we are intercepting people's emails to prevent us from terrorism, who the hell else has access to this information? What is going on? Who has the checks and balances? So it's all very well as saying, oh, well, it's here to defend us against terrorism, but who has the checks and balances? Who are the people who are accountable? Who are the people who oversee what is going on? If the system worked, for example, in terms of gathering intelligence, we wouldn't have Boston, we wouldn't have had Breivik, but there's been some severe shortcomings. The head of Norwegian intelligence was actually fired due to the fact that they failed to detect Breivik, and yet they've got all this signal gathering in intelligence. Is it, in the age of austerity, used as a tool of behaviour analysis? I think is another question that I have to ask as a taxpayer, and I think it is. I think you've got big corporations may have access to this data, and they can work out a lot from it. They can work out the whole behaviour of a country from this analysis. And as Edward Snowden rightly said, he does not want to live in a world where everything I do and say is recorded. It's not something that he's willing to support or live under. And I'm not, frankly. Having seen it all like I have, I'm not willing to live under that banner either. And he said that his sole motive was to inform the public as to that which is done in their name and to that which is done against them. Because we've no idea what is done against us at all as the public. So it's all very interesting. The talking heads in the media come out with all this stuff that it's used to protect us and all this kind of things. But there is something out there that is completely unaccountable, and that is the use of mind-invasive technology, which is also deployed upon an unknowing population. Nobody's safe from it. Whoever the people are who stalk me, and this is information in the public domain, they acted in an overt fashion. So before we get some talking head espionage smart-ass coming out in the media going, oh, no, oh boy, they do it covertly, wouldn't want to do that. These people were doing it overtly. They were quite bold, they were quite brassy at letting you know you were being observed, which has often happened to people who are doing UFO research. Oddly enough, people do get harassed who are doing this, and that is... It's worrying that people are not accountable. Very worrying indeed on this. I was, for example, what happened to me when this technology was deployed on me is that I was awoken from sound effects of guns. I was being screamed at on a daily basis, woken at 3 or 4 in the morning and being screamed at into the head. And I believe strongly that this was developed by an advanced weapons platform that has been tested upon me and maybe others. And it generates a living hell beyond people's comprehension. And this is the worry. This is the concern for me, that there is something lurks out there that is completely unaccountable doing this. I had phone calls, I received unmarked helicopters that filmed me, and, there does appear to be a cabal of people who are running riot involved in these activities, and it's corrupt. I was waiting for Mr. Snowden to blow the whistle on this, but that didn't happen. It is a fine example of compartmentalisation. People who work within these agencies probably are unaware at certain levels what goes on. I think one has to question if such people, in order to be involved in the activities I've witnessed, are psychopaths, to deploy technology on people of this nature. And let us be correct about this. There's a famous report, I've forgotten the gentleman's name, he was a United States Navy officer who discovered this was going on and ended up committed suicide. Highly dangerous. The worrying thing of the National Security Agency, there is no doubt in my mind that, we have to have these checks and balances against terrorism, against cyber threats from other nations. That is there. It's a real threat. I've looked at it, I've studied it, it's quite present. The the thing with this is with the NSA, for example, is that nobody, regardless of rank or office, is entitled to know national security information. So that means then that you could actually have a black project empire that remains at large, free from scrutiny, and appears to just do what it does what it wants. I know the US Senate, people in the US Senate have commented that there is a military-industrial complex with its own accountability, with its own checks and balances that completely ignores the democratic process. So if you picture me as a member of the public being selected by a special group of individuals within the intelligence apparatus, a very deep, shadowy one at that, I'm followed, I'm watched, my phone becomes intercepted, I've probably got no warrant on it, there's no legal request probably to do this, and they develop this weapons platform that invades the mind of the individual, which happened to me between 1999 and roughly 2003, and they you're instructed remotely when to wake up, when to go to the toilet. They experiment with sleep depriving and make your life a living hell. You put this on the internet, it's mute. The response to it is mute because people get uncomfortable about it. They don't like talking about it, and the first thing that happens is the messenger is shot. But it's very true. This does happen. In the Bourne films, a fine example of this is David Webb. I call myself, as part of my Planet X radio show, I call myself a paranormal Jason Bourne, which is perhaps what I am. It probably sums it up rather nicely. But in those films, he came across an operation called Treadstone. Treadstone was a top-secret project. Oddly enough, in the film, I've forgotten which Bourne one it was, but in one of the films, there was the Treadstone operation uncovered by the Guardian newspaper. How interesting that is. And that was using advanced high-tech mind-invasive techniques to produce a Manchurian candidate. I think that I've been witness to some very strange goings-on regarding all this. I think there was definitely some sort of top-secret program going on around me with this technology. An innocent member of the public, myself, is selected. And I think it's time that these revelations, the next level, beyond the phone tapping and the emails, nobody is safe from this, and I don't think that they would want it too much in the public today, but to me, it's an uncountable empire. It's certainly sinister beyond George Orwell, dear listener, and I know I've witnessed it firsthand. I think it's time the public was told, I really do. There's a lot that has gone on with me that I don't talk about, but I think it is time for those who know to step forward for what is going on here, because there's a bit of corruption and skullduggery going on and accountability. So we will get people like Louise mentioned on Newsnight and other people talking away about this, little knowing of the hidden, very real corrupt and dark environment that would even shock George Smiley if he was alive. And it's extremely sinister and extremely worrying that this goes on beyond the public domain and is not reported. This is the Tony Topping Show. And recently, coming back from, not coming back, I was coming back from a talk in, Birmingham. And we had a film company turn up, as I will describe later, from a company called Filterview Films. And it is there that I explain, for the first time ever on camera, the overt stalking that went on with me, or what is called gang stalking in our game. Our game. What a title. Anyway, yes, what a book. So we discussed this with the film company, and what is interesting to note about all this is that these people who act outside the democratic process within the national security apparatus had unmarked helicopters filming me, and I covered that in my little short documentary piece when they came to film me, about the fact that we had an unmarked helicopter break every air regulation in the book. Looked like something out of a James Bond movie filming me, and that was an AS555. Now that information is in the public domain, and the pilot looked at that and said that it was the most unusual helicopter that he had seen, because it was an AS555. It bristles with camera gear and surveillance stuff, and it was flying around me. They were filming me, I was filming them, and so the story goes. But these people who were following me under overt surveillance, you wouldn't recognise them as unordinary people. They blend in very nicely, all that kind of thing. But it was there, it was present, and it's a very great worry indeed as to where the checks and balances lie in all this. Not only that, what is interesting to note for the listeners' interest is that the Russians, Russian intelligence especially, during the Cold War, had a special service unit called Section 5. Now, Bulgarian intelligence also had a unit called Section 5, which I think was responsible for the umbrella poisoning in London of a diplomat. But this other unit that I think is in Chapman Pincher's research was specialists in kind of like levelling conspiracy theory at the West, cranking up conspiracy at the West, the more bizarre stories about what Western governments and even Israeli governments were doing, the better. So the more bizarre it was, the better. So we can see that there has probably been some bizarre goings on in that, as somebody has rightly said to me, when they interrogated Mr. Snowden, they'll have got every bit of information they required out of him. There wouldn't have been any lofty ideals from them. They would have interrogated him, and that there is the distinct possibility that they're played. So the gentleman who was detained is played. There's data that wants to be in the public domain, and it's quite simply not for a lofty ideal to change things from one point of view. It's actually to smear another intelligence service, and they'd never wear that. They'd never put that information in the public domain. They'd just never wear it. But it is worrying that there is a whiter than white, rose-coloured spectacle kind of look out there from media commentators regarding the intelligence services and what they do and who they are accountable to, because they're a rum lot. Things can get pretty nasty with them. Even as an ordinary citizen, you can be watched by them, and that, I feel, is very worrying in a democratic society. So really, when push comes to shove with all this, and in view of what's happened to me, I think that we must see more of this in the public domain, of wanting them to be accountable after what has got on. It's been a living nightmare for me. It really has with them, and it's important that this is now in the public domain and is seriously looked at. There is a former health minister from Finland who was also targeted. Numerous people will probably step forward and say that they were targeted as well by a very bizarre technology that, as I stress, goes beyond the normal tapping of the phone and interception of email, and that really, in some cases, may not be normal if you've got a corporate entity looking at this data for financial gain. They can probably see the behaviour of the economic behaviour of the whole country and know just how far to push people economically for maximum return. That's an element of sinister intelligence gathering that I would strongly object to indeed. Anyway, it's Planet X. This is the Tony Toppings Show, and it's over now. To our guest. If you want to contact me, I'm Tony, opsufo@hotmail.com. Hunting the UFO Mystery Adventures into the Unknown is a thought-provoking day presented to you on Saturday the 9th of November 2013 at the venue of St. John's Church Hall, Settle, BD 24 9JH. Time of 1 p.m. till 6 p.m. with an optional Skywatch meeting back up at 7:30 p.m. Speakers include Tony Topping, who will be taking you into the world of high strangeness, UFOs and remote viewing. Nigel Mortimer, Return of the Celestials. Nigel has been an actively involved in UFO investigations after he experienced at first hand a close-up UFO sighting from his hometown of Otley in West Yorkshire. He claims to have been in contact with otherworldly intelligences, establishing through psychic means an ongoing communication with the celestial being known as Sharlek. He has written about it in the book called The Circle and the Sword. His most recent work involves discovering ways that we can all prepare ourselves for the major Earth changes that will take place in our near future, including channeling energies to open multidimensional portals and the return of the Celestials. Warminster, A Portal from the Past is Kevin Goodman's lecture, and Kevin is the co-author of the book UFO Warminster, Cradle of Contact. This book chronicles the events Kevin and his friends experienced in the town during the 70s. Kevin has an open mind on the Warminster mystery and continues to explore this somewhat forgotten enigma. Kevin is headlining the Bufora Conference in Glastonbury in 2014 and will be presenting his fascinating talk prior to that in Settle. Tickets are only £20. It promises to be a great day. It's on Saturday the 9th of November 2013 at St. John's Church Hall, Settle, BD 24 9JH. Contact nmortimer@yahoo.co.uk. Tony Topping Show, good evening. We're live again. It's Tuesday. It's Planet X. It's 8 p.m. Here we are with our special guest. Lots going on the show tonight, and we've got a very unusual guest on the programme. Let me give you a bit of background about this before we go into interviewing Marie. And what it is that she starred in a TV programme called Confessions of an Alien Abductee for Channel 4, directed by somebody called Guy Gilbert. At the same time, I was approached by a very well-known director in the world of television, and he was what he had to say was very interesting. He is very well-known. I won't tell you who he is, but he has delivered award-winning television. One of his TV programmes, a very well-known one, is being broadcast on a broadcaster at the moment. I was having a chat with him about doing a thing with Channel 4 to do with aliens. What he said was quite interesting, because he said what they were after was something that was factually entertaining, but not something that was going to take the mick out of people. In fact, he said broadcasters, from what he was picking up from the commissioning team at Channel 4, the broadcaster wanted something that was pretty in-depth, pretty not seen before, pretty watchable TV, and all that kind of thing. Something to the level of an investigative piece like Dispatches on the subject or something like that would have, I think, been quite a challenge for Channel 4. And then I got a phone call from him again to say, I'm sorry, but Channel 4 are already in talks with somebody else, it would appear, and so our project won't be going ahead because they don't want to spend money twice, which is all fair enough. Now, I could be working with this guy in question. I hope the door is still open with him, but it's interesting to note that what Channel 4 then produced was something called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. I personally thought that it was a car wreck of a programme, and there was some particular people on there, a guy called Simon Parks. I've forgotten the other lady's name. Who was the other lady's name, Marie?
Chantal Piper.
Chantal Piper with the big beehive haircut, bless her. That was Chantal Piper, and then of course there was Marie Kayali, and or is it Kayali?
Kayali.
Sorry, say again.
Kayali.
I'm just going to call you Marie.
Okay.
So and then there was the Marie, who we all saw. Well, you maybe didn't. I don't know, listener, if you saw it, but basically what they did is they did a real hatchet job on the people involved. They chopped them to pieces, they defamed them, they turned it all around. And from a creative point of view, if I was looking at it from a TV director's point of view, I could see where that was going. I could actually see, okay, we can see what they've done there. It's for entertainment value. But I mean, come on, Channel 4. You've got the balls. You can do it. You can do a full factual investigative programme on this, a real good one. You put your money where your mouth is, instead of this mass media claptrap that's out there at the moment. And that includes Filterview Films, who came to film me only a few weeks ago, who were told to get back in their car to London if they thought they were going to take the mick out of me, because they accused me of being a narcissist. And I turned around and said that the game being played, as Marie will explain later to you, is a high-stakes one. There's a lot of pressure involved. You don't understand what's going on. It's not something made from a fairy tale. It's not a lie. You're on a quest for the truth at all times. And so I said to this film company, if you think you're going to go down the mainstream type programme that we saw of Confessions of an Alien Abductee with the crazy silly music in the background, get back in the car to London, because you won't be doing that with me. So I think we got off on the wrong foot, but we had a chat, and everything was fine. But I think that's the point to point out to all experiencers who may be approached by TV companies. It is your intellectual property, and you must guard it ruthlessly and make sure that they know where you stand with them at all levels. Business is business, and especially in the TV business, where people can run off with your intellectual property and change it, and so on and so forth. And this brings me round to Marie, because I watched Marie in action on the programme. She failed the lie detector test. We had a dramatic goings-on with Simon Parks, who is a councillor from Whitby, who would appear to have been covertly followed. You'll know about it, dear listener, if you're overtly or covertly harassed or followed by what is, I would say, an unaccountable and highly unethical agency that is responsible for keeping this all quiet. There are some pointers that that are missed out, and the mainstream media goes and questions completely in the wrong direction about it. And, so the title of our show could be called, Marie, what happened to you really? Because we're seeing Marie on the Channel 4 programme. She's being stitched up something rotten. We can see that she's failed the lie detector test. There was 1,001 things going on, including, dare I say, something to do with lifting a top up, something like that. And there was 1,001 things going on. She spoke briefly about all kinds of things, and it was edited and chopped in such a way to be slightly defamatory, may I say. So the question that was constantly on my mind was, Marie, what really went on? What is really happening to you? Because they missed it by 1,000 miles. The production team were that busy focusing on the kook tabloid humour from a creative point of view that they missed out on the stuff you've sent me via email, which people have not seen and are not aware of, is quite staggering, and they've missed out on it. And it gives reason to believe, in your experiences, and also that you are seeking the truth. You are not.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You are not there to make it up. You're certainly not there to make a fast burger. You're just trying to find out what went on. And so I
want the truth for myself, and plus for other people as well. Because I know what's happening to me. Nobody can tell me at this stage that this is not happening. So I need to find the truth. So it's not in my interest to bullshit or lie or even look at fake evidence. I have to scrutinise every little thing before I believe it, because otherwise it's not going to get me anywhere. I'll be stuck in a hole. I'll be all mixed up. I won't know what's going on. So I have to be really careful what I believe. Yeah. But with the Channel 4 thing, there's a lot went on that nobody knows about. I actually did about 12 or 13 days of filming. That's just disappeared. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to say it was a whole thing for me. That sounds too narcissistic or whatever, but it does appear to be that way.
What would you say, Marie, to somebody who turned around to you? I'll be a mainstream media smart ass. Yeah. I'm going to turn around to you. I think, Marie, look, you failed the lie detector test. You were just seeking attention.
Well, there was a whole lot of things to do with that lie detector test. It wasn't supposed to be put in there. We were supposed to do another one. They gave me the option of doing another one and picking the person myself, because I found out this guy wasn't reputable, basically, the very next day. We just
have to be aware that that may be the opinion of the guest and not the host nor Planet X.
Well, I found a lot out there about that's online, and there's been a research a research paper done on this specific 3-question test that he's doing, and it's actually an official paper that doesn't like this specific test, and it's not credible. So I found all out this the next day and approached them, and they said they were going to scrap the lie test. They said, well, you can do another one, and I said, well, I'd rather leave it in and have both sides to show people that these are not accurate. Right. And I said, leave it in, but as long as you get my side in as well, and we can show that these are not accurate and people are putting themselves up, because I didn't actually fail. It was an inconclusive, actually. It wasn't a fail.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on with halfway through the test. There was sirens going on outside, loads of them. You can hear it on the full 2-hour one. Yeah. And that really upset me, because it brought me back to the night that my daughter died. There was loads of sirens going on. And for him to say that my body didn't change whatsoever from the first half and the second half is a bit inaccurate, I think. My body had to have been doing something.
Just let me get this right for the listeners then. So what you're saying is that you did 2 lie detector tests.
Oh, no, I didn't do 2. They offered me to do another one, and I could pick the person. Right. And I said, well, I'd like to leave that one in and get both sides in, as long as you get my side in and my comments, and show the people that it's not accurate, that they could be setting themselves up for a fall. And that's what I was looking at. They said they would do that, but then they said they would scrap it completely. And then when I actually saw the final cut, they'd sneakily put it in and cut my bits out, so it was all one-sided. So they basically lied. Yeah, they lied.
Do you think, Marie, that is there any mysterious people in black suits who were behind the programme who decided splice that, chop that?
Definitely.
You think so? Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, I know the day it changed. Even the whole demeanour of the crew changed. Well, what happened was I went to see a doctor in Harley Street with a view to get this. I've got a lump on my arm that could be an implant. Basically, there were signals coming off it. So it's the only one that I think would be feasible to remove because I'm not touching my brain. I was told that you can't get them out, and other ones are on nerves. So I've had problems before with getting something out, so I wouldn't go there. But this one on my arm, it's mobile, it's loose. So we went to see a doctor with that. He was happy to be filmed. He said he would be part of the program, doctor in Harley Street, and they paid the fee. We went in, he checked it. He said, well, I can't remove it yet, but you need a scan up, but I will do the scan. We arranged the scan, and I think the day before the scan, I actually got an email from the doctor saying, I've had a look again at this thing on your arm, and it's so small, and it's not harming you in any way, it's not causing you problems, so we don't feel it necessary to go through the expense and, the time of having an MRI. So we'll just leave it there, basically. So I got back to him because I wasn't quite happy with the diagnosis. He said it was a fibroma then, and I looked up fibroma, did a bit of research, and this is not what's on my arm. A fibroma is a horrendous growth, This is definitely not what it is. So I approached the doctor. I said, I don't really want to contradict a professional diagnosis, but I've just been doing a bit of research, and the photographs have actually made me sick, and I saw the, horrible. And this is not what I don't feel this is what I have on my arm. So then he gave me another diagnosis, and we left it at that. I didn't bother replying. But then the crew came down the next day, and they were acting really, really, really strange, basically, very strange. They weren't joking, they weren't friendly. Guy was completely, they really bullied me, and this is the day that you probably see when I said that Gina was taken by aliens, basically. That was the same day.
Let's just, Marie, because this is absolutely very interesting stuff. What I've got to do is I've got to shape it so that the listeners know what you're talking about. What we've got is one question that I just need to, well, not a question, a point of clarification. I would suggest that you are a UFO experiencer and implant researcher, or a person who's got implants. Is that correct?
I went to Arizona in February, March 2013 to the UFO Congress, and I met Dr. Lear's colleagues there, Steve Colburn, and they're from ANS Scalpel Research. And they've been doing the implants, as you know, and removing them and analysing them. And Steve Colburn is a material scientist, and he's working in nanotechnology. That's his actual job. Right. So he's working with Dr. Leary now, and he'd probably be taking over because Dr. Leary is quite old now. And he's been analysing these implants. So I had a scan while I was there, and they found areas. So they found about 6 or 7, 8 even, and they found this dye all over me that they checked with the ultraviolet light. So it looked like I'd had an experience about a week, 10 days prior to being tested there.
Being tested. So what we'll do is I'm just going to play a clip. I'll play a clip of a Whitley Strieber interview with a guy who's big on implants, who knows the inner workings and the technology of them, because they cause all kinds of paranormal goings on around people.
I'm starting to realise that.
They disturb massively the kind of like the 3-dimensional reality that we're in. If you're an experiencer, so I just find that very interesting that they suddenly changed to not being friendly. Why was that then? Do you think was that a?
I think they were threatened, and then that's when they came up with the doctor. They said, "Did you get an email this morning?" And I said, "Well, I did actually from the doctor." So they said, "Can you read out the email?" I read out the email for them, filmed it, and then they said, "Well, what do you think of that?" And I said, "Well, he's probably right. It is very small, and maybe we'll have to go somewhere else or something like that." But they said, "Well, we've had other information that he's been threatened and he's been told not to do the show." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And they said, "Well, what do you feel about that then?" And I said, "Well, to be quite honest, I'm not surprised." I said, "But you two look absolutely shocked, They were both as white as ghosts." But they filmed me especially saying that, got my opinion on what happened. So this wasn't even going to be shown. I don't know why they were asking me so many questions, but I thought it was, but before that, I still thought it was a serious documentary, because they got so much information out of me. I was out every day doing different things, Skyping with people, because I had a reaction when I got back from USA with the implants. My face swelled up, my knees swelled up. So we did a Skype with Steve Colburn to see if he knew if that had happened to anybody else. It was something that we should be noting down, that it's a possibility it could happen, because it seemed to happen after I had the scans. Every one of them reacted in some way. So I had a bit of problems for a few weeks there. So that was all cut out as well. Everything was cut out out. See, the thing what I find strange is we did a tester tape in October, actually just 2 days before my daughter died. We did a tester tape each. I did a day, Chantal did a day, Simon did a day, Joanne and Miles did a day. So we all did a day each. They clipped it all together, put an hour together or something like half an hour, sent that off as the sample. Now what I've noticed from the actual program itself, all of Chantal's footage has been taken from that sample, except for probably about 5 minutes where they added the chicken bit in, which I find it totally ridiculous. They must have been paid for that ad because they had me hiding everything with a brand on. We can't show this, can't show this. And then they put a bucket of Kentucky in there. So obviously they were paid to put that in there. Second thing, Simon's was from the sample as well. I have a clip of the tape, the sample. I can send it to you. You'll see for yourself. The only bit they added in for Simon was the meeting at the town hall. And he said he was chased. They cut that out, obviously. But I don't know about that.
Do you think Simon was being harassed, Marie?
No, the crew said they said that didn't happen. They told me the next day because I had my filming the next day, and they said, nothing really untoward happened. So it went quite well. They were only down there for a couple of hours, and they did the meeting. So I don't know if that happened or not, but they didn't seem to think it did. They didn't mention it. Well, another thing, Miles and Joanne, they had to film them again for some reason about a week or so before it was aired. All their footage was missing, so they had to do a whole day. Everything in a day, all the footage, dressed in different clothes, pretend it was taken from different days, sort of thing. They put all that together. So that means all the filming that we did prior was gone with me in it and everything else with Miles and Joanne. But Simon's was there because they took it from the sample. Chantal's was there because they took it from the sample, and the bits they added in later on. So I think a whole 12 days of film was gone. It was completely gone. All the work that I did, I've been running around London doing different things, different tests, all cut out. Loads of stuff's been cut out. So I know the day changed.
Did they pay you for it at all?
I didn't get a penny. I mean, they still even owe me some expenses. They locked me out of my flat, something weird on the keys. They couldn't get back in. I had to pay £100 to go to locksmith. I mean, they never refunded me for that, and I still have taxi fare. So no, I did not get a penny. I doubt the other, Chantal or Simon. I can't be certain, but I definitely did not get a penny.
Right. Okay, it's all very interesting, isn't it? And we could go on forever more. We could actually go.
You could go on forever, analyse it to death.
I know, exactly. You could analyse, but you see, this is what is interesting, because I was watching you, and I was thinking to myself, what's really going on? What's really going on? And you were born in Dublin. Of 7 and 4 brothers and 2 sisters, and I understand that one sister sadly died at 3 years ago. And the listeners may also be interested to know. This is probably a good start point to get into you now and your experience. So don't be sending me emails about what was said, what wasn't said, what Marie does think, what she doesn't think.
On.
I won't be interested, and I won't. I won't be responding. Yeah, exactly. So
I'd like to wish Joanne and Miles well, actually, because I have learned a lot with meeting them. Met some great people, and I got my foot in the door with them. And they did my interviews. And they've been great, and I wish them both well in whatever they're doing, and I have to thank them for that.
He's an absolutely cracking bloke. I've met Joanne; she's a cracking lass. I do not understand why they've fallen out. I think it's tragic for the good research that they've been doing, but that's another story, and I hope that they will patch up their differences. I really do. But anyway, it's all about you, Marie, and your experiences and what really happened, and you've had them. I tell you, a good point would be to start is when you were aged 3.
Age 3.
And it starts from there, really, doesn't it, for you?
Yeah. At age 3, I mean, I remember beings coming in the wall to get me. It seemed to be every night, or I can't remember how often it was, but I'd be hysterical, and I remember it very well. But it was always put down, don't be silly, it's nothing happening, and I'd be insisting, of course there is. And I could describe them and everything. I still have those images embedded in my mind. And they were what they call Nordics. I don't name anything or label anything, but this is the label people give them, But they were the blonde beings. There used to be a woman and 4 men that used to come. I don't know, couldn't tell you how often or how regular, but it's several times that I remember anyway.
Can I just
nobody believes me.
well, can I just add that, do you not feel, from my point of view and your point of view, that they're very good at putting people like yourself and even myself in very highly complex situations and leaving you to pick up the pieces without a frigging clue what's going on with their presence? Would you not concur?
Gosh, well, it's really, it takes a long time to put the picture together. It took me years, and you change your perspective as you learn new things, I think, and I've had to change what I thought was happening and change ways. Women, you think they're evil and then they must be good. Because I do get a lot of help from them. People might think that's mad, but I do get a lot of help. And I studied things years ago, and I never realized why I was studying things like psychology and all sorts of things. And I've realized that that's helping me now with my quest and, my road, wherever I'm going. And so I'm sure I was led in that direction by a force to help me to cope with what's happening with me today.
It seems that way. It seems to be actually be a change in the biology of the human species to handle this hidden reality. It's definitely very Rupert Sheldrake going on, I think, with some of that. What is interesting, Marie, is, and I'd like to know more about this, is at the age of 6, you indicate that you were speaking to off-world intelligences, aliens, people like us. But what the strange thing about that, when I say people like us, it's the normality of it. It's the normalisation that you go through with it. It's quite normal, is all this, for people like us to speak to these things, to look at these things, to see these things. But I'm interested to know, from the age of 6, you were speaking about aliens. What were you speaking about at the age of 6?
Growing up in Ireland, it's very religious. All the schools are church related, and you're going to church every day, every couple of days with the school, confessional, the rest of the family, mass. So I was always against religion and arguing, and I always said aliens. I never ever said demons, ghosts, whatever. I used to say aliens created us and question God. And my family used to think I was a little bit, aliens? Why is she always talking about aliens? And that seemed to sort of maybe fade out after a couple of years, and it wasn't talked about again. But it was always in the back of my mind, always an alien presence, always. And I had loads of weird experiences that I couldn't talk about, because there isn't really anything you can you tell people, it's happening, and people don't really want to know at that age. They go, don't be silly, it's not real. But I always knew it was real. So you sort of get fed up just telling people. So things would happen and I wouldn't even tell anybody. Yeah. I just deal with it myself, basically.
Well, you even chose that. So this is an interview. You were, how can I put it, even at a young age, you were looking at non-religion. And I'm interested.
Definitely
about that as well. What made you look at? What made you kind of reach that conclusion at such a young age? Because you chose the only non-religious school in Ireland. I mean, there's all this going on, all this stuff about you, and the production crew just want to make you look stupid. I can't believe it. The creative team. Anyway, sorry, I'll leave it. But so you choose the only non-religious school in Ireland. What made you do that at such an early age? Was that shaped by?
I honestly don't know. It might have been. I honestly don't even know, because I only found out it was the only non-religious school about 3 years ago, because they were, or not 3 years ago, about 5 years ago or so, just before it closed down. It's closed down now. The years are flying past now. I lose track. But just before it closed down, they had a school reunion, and I got the things and got a bit of history about it. And that's when I realised, my God, how did I even know that? It was the other side of Dublin. I had to catch a train at 7 o'clock in the morning and a bus and all the rest of it. So didn't go. None of my friends went there. They all went to the local comprehensive and religious schools, whatever. So it was totally, I don't know, I just wanted to go to that school. I insisted and screamed, I'm not going anywhere else, and I went. And it was a headmaster who didn't like school, he didn't like religion, and he didn't like sport because he was a bit of a wimp and he was bullied. So he opened a school in his back garden, and they were all professors, academics. So it was a totally different way of learning, and the government thought we were a bunch of hippies, really, but they were all professors and theologians, and I got the best education from them. And we talked talked about things and discussed politics and discussed religion and discussed ancient history, even though religion wasn't part of the curriculum. But see, in Ireland years ago, to get into university, you needed Irish language, Latin, and religion, those 3 subjects, to get into university. Yeah. So I had to study Latin and Irish and religion to get the A levels and things anyway. But we were planning on moving away anyway, so I dropped the religion, so I didn't care about that. But you had the option to do religion at the school, but it wasn't like bullied down your throat, but you had to go off-site, you had to go somewhere else. So, but in the school, it was mainly people who, before it used to be diplomats and people who were different religions and things like that, and it used to be a private school, but then after a year, they abandoned the fees, so it was free, really. And then in the Parliament, actually, they even were so serious, the situation, that the government was frightened about the school, that they opened up, bought the land right next door, opened up a strict Catholic school, and even stole our school colours, and tried to bully us into all this religious stuff. But so our headmaster abolished the uniform completely, so we could just all come into school dressed like hippies. So that made them even worse. So, but the education-wise, it wasn't like bullied and religious-wise like it was in the normal schools there. So I was able to open up and discuss things with proper professors and have a decent education, really.
What people probably didn't know also, well, they wouldn't know, would they? But what they didn't know about you is at age 6 you had an implant removed. You were told it was just a piece of debris, but it follows the modus operandi of implants.
It's, if you look at the whole thing together,
because it changed in size and shape and actually moved when the surgeon tried to remove it. They are intelligently aware, and they also, for the listeners' interest, they use something called over unity, whereby the less power you put into it, the more power it produces. And they run cool, these implants. They never run at temperature. They run cool. And the big key as well with all this, the reason why everybody wanders around in a confused daze trying to find out what happened to them and etc., is because it's a subconscious technology that is highly evolved, what they're using. So it's not a physical, three-dimensional, tangible thing that would probably even show up as evidence. People look for black and white evidence. It doesn't quite work like that. It's all about the subconscious and it's not just all about the subconscious, but there's an element of the subconscious where the technology these things are using, it uses the subconscious in a highly, highly intelligent way and adapts accordingly, so that people run around confused, wondering what's happened to them and why are they having interaction. And this is what causes the confusion, because you'd have lots of different experiences through your life. But there was one that happened when you were 18, you were telling me about, and I think the listeners would be interested to hear that.
Well, I think, just to make a point of what you were just saying, I think we're treading on dangerous ground here when we're saying that some of these things aren't physical, because what I'm hearing now is people saying I've got non-physical implants. To me, this could be imaginary. I'm having taken out from a healer, so I'll have to.
Which is why there's no other witnesses around when you're having your experiences and so on.
Well, I've had witnesses.
Exactly, but what we're trying to say is it's perhaps I'm not disagreeing with you, Marie. Actually, you do raise a valid. Just for clarification, yes, there are physical experiences, but they are using a subconscious kind of thing as well.
No, I mean with the implants, the non-physical implants. Yes. People are saying now they've got non-physical implants.
No,
that's what I meant. Sorry.
Undetectable implants?
Non-physical, undetectable, invisible, whatever you want to call it.
Yes. Yeah. Non-physical,
undetectable. Because I've got a couple that came up on X-rays, and I've got.
Sorry, we got our wires crossed completely there with where it was going.
Because this can open doors to people who have got like 6 invisible. It's invisible imaginary implants in my eyes. If they're going to say they're non-physical. Yeah, it's you're opening doors for everything now.
There's something that they have used that is kind of like what I'm trying to describe is a level of consciousness that is beyond the spiritual, that is moving, a level of subconscious collective, there's Jung's collective unconsciousness, and there's also, I think, some of us experiences emerging into an alien collective unconsciousness. I do think that is what is happening with some of us on occasion. But these implants really are a wild card, because I'm not sure myself what the purpose of them are.
I know. I think they do different things. I don't think they're all doing the same things. No. And they're definitely not trackers. I never thought they were trackers, because they're so sophisticated. They don't need to track you.
Yeah, it's highly sophisticated.
They know where you are from when you were born. I've been followed all my life, and it's not from. I don't think it's because of one little tracker at my ear or something like that. They know beforehand who you are. I'm sure.
But they do track. They do track, and that brings in a very frightening component to it, because the truth with that is stranger than fiction. But anyway, back to you. I'm waffling. And it's about your experiences, and what I'm looking at is tell the listeners what happened when you were 18, when you were over at
When I was 18, I moved from Ireland when I was 16. Just when I left school, my dad moved here with the business of the family moved, so as I left school, it was a good time to move really, and with the rest of the family, and get them all into a new school after summer holidays, and I could start college. So I met my first boyfriend when I came over. We were together about 3 or 4 years, and just before we broke up, I was 18, 19. I'd stayed over at his house one night. We didn't live far from my mum's house. His parents were away. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I woke up to all this noise. We were both asleep, went to bed. All I remember hearing was just a load of commotion, not in our bedroom. It was outside in the hallway and out in the sitting room, the other room. It seemed like the whole house was shaking, everything in the house. Although I didn't feel any vibrations myself, but I could hear it. They were jumping off the floor. There was a wardrobe in the hallway, and the door of that was slamming really hard, really fast. And he had some chrome rail bars there in the hallway, and they were literally jumping off the ground. I remember those two distinctly because they were outside the bedroom door. And I woke up, and I heard it for about 10 seconds, because it sort of was in my sleep. I heard it, when you hear the phone ring or the doorbell ring, and it sort of wakes you up eventually after a few seconds. It was sort of like that. I heard it in my sleep, and it woke me up. And it was still carrying on when I woke up. And it was just the most terrifying, horrible experience, because I just, at that time, I thought it was a poltergeist or ghost, and aliens never even entered my mind at that stage, never. Because I hadn't really seen any aliens, or had any lights in the rooms, or anything like that to do with space, so it never occurred to me that it could be aliens.
Well, I was just saying, what is incredible is the consequences of your boyfriend.
It's a terrible situation. Yeah, it is. It's awful. But I remember he was just lying in the bed next to me, and he had a crucifix, and he was holding onto his crucifix, and I remember he was freezing, absolutely icy cold, looking up at the ceiling, really shivering, and I was shaking. What's happened? And he was just completely gone in a sort of trance or catatonic state, and can't really remember all the details, but I got up and said I'm going home. He didn't want to come, he wanted to stay there, so I left him. I legged it home to my mum, and of course my mum blames me, because I used to read tarot cards and things like this, and she used to think studying paranormal things attracts things to you. But I knew that wasn't true anyway, because I do study a lot of things, and it could be seen as weird to other people, but it's research to me.
Do you think it was demonic, or do you think it was alien, Marie?
Well, I know now it was alien. Well, he said it was aliens. He never said anything else. He was saying aliens from day one. Eventually transpired, I went home. The next day, I told my sister to come round with me. I can go back there on my own. I want to see what happened. Went round the next day, and I will talk to my sister. I was talking about somebody yesterday. I need to speak to my sister and get more details. She might remember a bit more. But we went round to the flat, and I remember there was glass everywhere. He'd smashed, or I thought he'd smashed. I thought he'd done it. All the mirrors in the house had smashed. The house looked wrecked. Everything was smashed and broken and really bad, like it'd been trashed. And I asked him, I was saying, what happened? And he was really in a bad state, shaking, and still the same, sitting in the corner. I felt terrible for leaving him then, but I was young, I was 18, I thought, I'm not saying it, I'm legging it, I'm off. So I was off, really. He didn't want to come, so I said, we'll stay. But nowadays I wouldn't do that. I'd be a bit more caring, but I think teenagers don't really think about things like that.
It just opens a staggering kind of, biography of who you are really, with a question mark, because from what you're saying and from what you've told me, and there's a lot going on with you that people currently don't know about, that you've indicated, and you'll announce that in due course, I'm sure. But what you were talking about was the fact that he's still not recovered to this day, and I understand, he's no longer with us, is that correct?
He's alive, but as far as I know, I haven't heard anything, because I left then, he was hospitalised, we had to get his parents involved, and he just kept constantly talking about aliens. He said he saw them operating on me in the bed, and saw my intestines out. He said they were taking things out of my stomach. Now, this was in 1978, 79, so I don't think there was a lot of this around then, but it has been known. This is the pattern now that people are saying. But in those days, we didn't know anything about that, and I don't think there was anything like that. I never read anything about stuff like that years ago.
Interest, Marie, then, do you go with the mainstream that you've seen greys, or are they blonde?
I've never seen greys, no.
So you've never seen a grey either?
Never seen a grey, never.
I can't say either. But you've seen Nordics?
I've seen them, and I've seen it in the episode I had in 1998 when I saw the big blue ball coming out the ceiling. I saw different ones. They weren't greys. They looked like bluey grey to me, like a light blue, but slightly grey. But they didn't have the big, huge black eyes, and they looked very old. Like I would say they were elders, if I to put a word on it. They looked like old people with funny skin, like rough, elephanty, wrinkly skin, but they didn't look scary. They were very pleasant. So I saw that ball come out the ceiling. I saw the ship outside, that huge white glowy ball. Then I saw this thing come out the ceiling, and next thing I'm just on a ship, and I don't know how I got from here to there.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we're just working through like a timeline of events with you, and we'll come to all that information in a minute, because
I know it's funny because you jump and you get
I think it's fascinating. Your story is that fascinating that I want the listeners to kind of like follow the timeline of events with us as to what's what and where, because after all that, you moved to London to start to be an accountant. You didn't.
Yeah, because he was hospitalised then, so I had to get out. My mum said go to Ireland for a few months, so I went to Ireland for a few months and came straight to London then, never saw him again.
Yeah, that's right. And this is what I found absolutely fascinating, is that you were married within a few weeks of being there.
Within 3 weeks. We met under Eros. It really is a funny story. We didn't even want to go there. Ended up going to under Eros in Piccadilly Circus. Met my husband to be there, and got married in about 3 weeks.
Yes, and what I find, because I'm into espionage. I study it very deeply, and bigly carry fan. and this the listeners may find fascinating, was that your husband's father was the ambassador in Washington for Syria.
Yeah, when JFK was there, his best friend was Henry Kissinger, so he's quite old. He's in his 90s now, but he's still alive.
Is he? And
he's still alive.
He's heavily connected to the Syrian government, both your mother-in-law and father-in-law.
He was actually, both. He was head of secret intelligence going back to 1953, I read. So up to, God knows, probably 90s, he was still sort of head of, and the mother-in-law side, her father was head of the secret police in Syria for several years. He was a general.
Yeah. So you've got
he was head of the Mukhabarat in Syria.
You've got this kind of black spy world lurking around you while all this is going on. Yeah.
Well, he's even admitted to being a multi-spy. He was a multi-spy for a lot of countries, so God knows what was going on. And my mother-in-law's brother lives in Germany, and he was involved with the scientists getting them out of East Berlin into West Berlin all through the 60s and 70s. So, there's a lot in the family on both sides, And Kayali family run a lot of the government there. If you look at the Minister for Agriculture, Minister for this, they're all Kayalis. And even the Syrian president, when they actually hacked her email, his wife's email, she was using the name A. Kayali to do all her shopping online. That was a report in the paper last year, I think. Yeah, she was using A. Kayali to buy her shopping.
I know from what you've been telling me that John Irwin, who was, and we'll have him on the show, but John Irwin was part of a top secret unit called the 16, so it is alleged, which is kind of like an SAS type special boat squadron unit that was tasked with dealing with UFOs and strange goings on. Just to inform the listeners, oddly enough, there is a thing called Operation Tabalan that happened in Antarctica that involved a special boat squadron which was was all about the recovery of a Marine unit that had been murdered by something called the Polar Men, and Britain were doing secret operations in Antarctica, chasing aliens and UFOs before the Americans were even aware of this. And so John Irwin was over there in the 1950s. What I'm interested to know, Marie, is with you being involved in the kind of the spy world with the family relatives circling around you, was anything mentioned by them about UFOs and aliens then?
Never once, not once, no. It was mostly spy government stuff and sneaky politics and things like that. Nothing. He was passing information on my father-in-law a lot and getting him a lot of money for it, because I used to get the checks at our flat and I had to bank them, so I know who was paying him a lot of money and where it was coming from. So he was definitely selling something top level information.
What the great British public don't know on that Channel 4 programme as well is that you had Ministry of Defence special clearance.
Yeah, I used to work for this company.
Fascinating. Just fascinates me. Oh dear. Yeah.
I used to work for a company years ago in the 80s who did slide formatting, and it was before Windows 95 even. You know, they used to have these imaging equipment, and they converted photographs onto slides for presentations and for their training manuals. And I was the head of finance there, and the safe was in my office, and MOD didn't like the fact that I was Irish, my husband was Syrian, and I've got access to their files in my office. So there was a big thing about it, and the boss eventually said, you know, she's the head of finance, she has to have the safe in her office. So I had to have a special clearance, but that made me even more curious. I used to nose at all the files then. Once I knew they didn't want me to see them, I thought, well, I want to see them.
Yeah.
But what they were doing was their main clients were MOD, Marconi, GEC, pharmaceuticals, and then there was Beach and SmithKline Beach, and they've changed the name so many times. But there's all those major people were their clients. And what used to happen was the designers worked on logos and media and all stuff like that, and slides and all their information. And then it would all come up to me in a hard copy bag, and we would prepare the bills upstairs and keep all of them as archives. So I always had a look at the MOD stuff, and Marconi especially, because all these scientists were dying at that time.
Why do you think the Marconi scientists were?
They were all working on something. We know that. They were all working on something, the same thing, all these scientists. Because while I was working there, I used to, because I was always like nosy and especially involved with political family, I was always interested in what the government got up to in those days. I'm not now. I'm not interested in politics that much now, but I used to be. And you'd see this little thing in the paper, another Marconi scientist, and it'd be a little tiny paragraph, like 2 sentences on page 5 or something. But I'd pick it up and like, another scientist dead. So it made me a bit more nosy, but they were actually working on, it was nothing to do with this black girl that Miles talks about at the time. It was to do with, they were working on a free energy thing and something else, something nuclear.
I refer listeners to the black oil thing, what Marie talks about. I refer to the interview that I did with Miles Johnson about it to do with nanotechnology oil. I won't go into it now because these experiences are all about Marie, but it's worth a listen to if you check out the Tony Topping show and the interview with Miles Johnson about that. It's very interesting to listen to. So what we've basically got is we've got you, Marie, who came on this TV programme to describe alien abduction experiences when in fact your father-in-law was the head of secret intelligence for Syria in 40 years. You had MOD clearance, your uncle was involved in the CIA, etc., etc. And yet the wheel you on as this. Yeah. It's just bonkers.
Plus my own career as well, my own work career. I mean, I worked for the head of, the owner of Boston Celtics. I was, Miss Owen, look, I won't mention his name actually because he doesn't know him anymore. But, he's a multi-billionaire and I had sole responsibility of 35 bank accounts. So, I'm not a dishonest person. I'm not a deceptive person. And I didn't build up my career by being like that. And I've worked for, I've had finance manager companies, jobs several times. My last job was head of finance for a major charity organisation in London.
It wouldn't be long before the same people who... This is what I don't get about the media, Marie, regarding projecting at people like ourselves. I could be interviewed by somebody in the media who tells me that I'm absolutely bonkers for having these UFO experiences, etc., etc., while at the same time they're down the lodge doing their thing.
It's just ridiculous. It's getting tiresome, isn't it?
This is what I say, because you make an important point that one of the companies you work for, where was this big hoo-ha, you comment was a Freemason company. What's all that about then? We're just a Freemason company.
Well, most charities are run by Freemasons because you can open a charity, anybody can open a charity, but you've got to have a board of trustees to oversee. And these board of trustees, they have to be lords, ladies, this, whatever, and they're all Freemasons. So you can't just do what you want, open a charity. They're all run by these people.
Right. And so, well, I suppose they do, we could argue that they do a lot for charity. But would you not agree with me from your experiences, Marie, that there is some kind of very ancient, very dark force that moves among us that is responsible and goes to a lot of time and trouble for suppressing our knowledge of what is out there, what is beyond the human race in terms of encounters?
You can't deny that that's not there. There definitely seems to be some sort of force that wants to keep it quiet for whatever reason, but the thing is, though, I really don't think people can handle it. People say, I can handle it, but they really can't. They really, really can't. You can see that, the Rendlesham Forest guys, even after all this time, they're still crying about trauma. It makes me laugh sometimes because they put themselves in my shoes and they've had one experience and they're still crying about it. That really makes me laugh sometimes.
I only last week, Marie, or the week before, had, over the past 3 nights, had UFOs coming in over my house. Backwards, forwards, forwards. It's all perfectly normal. The psychic attacks have been absolutely ferocious. It's a whole different world. What is reported in the media, what is written about on the internet about UFOs and the government cover-up and all that kind of thing is very different in real life. It's a different world in real life. What really goes on, it's very different. What I'd like to ask you, what I'm interested in, is can you describe to the listeners what it is like to be taken aboard one of these UFOs, one of these craft that come in over your house or that kind of...
You mean the physical feeling of it?
What have they said to you, I think, is the thing. So, what is the experience like of being taken aboard one of these ET craft, and, what information is communicated to you?
Oh, God, it's a really difficult question because they've been a bit different. One of them, the last one I had, which was that I can remember, was 2010 that I had the clear memories for. When I was awake when I saw the UFO. I just remember I was at the window having a cigarette and I just got back from the hospital. My sister's the night before my sister died, and having a cigarette at the window. Saw this red light fly across the sky, and straight away I thought, well, it's really cool, and started talking to them in my head. And then I started saying, well, why can't you help my sister? She's ill, you've got technology.
May I just rewind for the listeners there? You said that you started talking them in your head. In my head,
just saying,
turn around and go, well, Marie, you're obviously mad, but I put that to one side because I don't think you're mad at all, because this does happen. And I think you'll find that they're not in your head, they're kind of like outside of you. It's kind of like,
they commute. I know they hear every single word. I know they do, and I don't care. People think that's madness. It's a fact. I have to say it.
To you?
Oh, they weren't saying anything to me, but what it was my mother was praying and they were all praying. So somebody said to me, why don't you ask your alien friends to help? So that came into my mind. So when I saw this red light, I started just talking to them. I said, well, I said, come back and let me take a picture at least. And then I said, well, anyway, I said, while you're there, while you're listening, why can't you help my sister? Can you please help my sister? And I started talking about that. Well, within about 2 minutes, this ship just came from behind me. I mean, I have to say it was a ship or a craft. It wasn't, there's no way it was anything that we have. It was just out of this world. You can't mistake it. You can't mistake it for anything else. It was a triangular craft, and it was only about 20, 30 feet above my building. And it was so low, I could see every single detail on that. And it wasn't a smooth craft, it was full of things, lights, dropping, everything. So I had a memory of grabbing my phone and thinking, oh my God, I'm just awestruck and this is so, just amazing. Because I've never seen anything that close up or with that much detail in my life, that big, you know. And I was just amazed, and I thought I got 4 minutes of film on that, and I had that memory, and that was it. It was, oh my God, it was great, it was fantastic. Told my uncle about it the next day, and, you know, and then we went to the hospital to see my sister, and, you know, my sister died then in a couple of days. But, after about 2 years, I got the real memory back. It came to me just one day. I was washing up in the kitchen, and it was like, oh my God, this vision. It was like an image, like shoot in my head, and it was like me looking into this craft, and it was open. It was open. I was looking at the inside of it. That wasn't the underside. I thought with all the lights, I could clearly. The image it was open, I could see right in. And I just started getting images it was sort of not straight away, it was like gaps every hour, maybe every 40 minutes or something like that, but not straight away. And then I'd get another image and I'm like, oh my God. And each image was me getting further and further into the ship. So by the end, probably of the evening of the next day or something, several hours, I'd had this whole memory back of what happened. And I just could not believe that my reality, because my memory of that day, I was awake, I was still awake when it went. I saw it go off. I remember filming it. That was a real memory to me. I was completely awake, completely real, and I just couldn't believe that my memory had been distorted. I mean, when you're asleep and wake up, it's easy. I'd understand that, but I was completely awake with a cigarette in my hand, and I still had the cigarette in my hand. And I didn't think anything happened, but it did. I was on the ship that night. I remember it very clearly now. The memories have all come back to me, and that's the night I met the 5 light beings. But all I remember then, I was going up into the ship, and how it took me. I don't know how I got from my bedroom to underneath the ship, but suddenly you're underneath the ship, like out of the building. I don't think I went out the window. My windows are quite small, and that'd be quite awkward, I think, physically. So they must take you through the ceiling or up, shoot just like that, through the building, I don't know. But I'm just under this ship, and I remember looking up, and it was just sucking me up, and it was a really nice, lovely feeling. I wasn't unbalanced, like wobbly, you're just there, and it's like a lovely, really nice feeling. And it took probably, 30 seconds, a minute to get right to the top. And when I was inside, I saw, it was like a pyramid, like a twisted pyramid.
Wow, and you described them as light beings, you said a few moments ago.
When I got to this thing it wasn't, on the outside it was like really small, but when I got inside it was sort of huge and a pyramid shape, and it was just full of stuff all the way up. It looked like controls. There were like controls all around me, lights, flashing buttons, all this kind of stuff.
Did they mention anything about time travel technology, and there were certain parts of the ship that you couldn't approach or go into because of time travel technology?
No, because I'll tell you what happened when I get to the shop. That's not how it worked, really. When I finally got to the top, I remember it was quite a small room, like the size of a normal living room. It wasn't huge, so the ship probably was quite small when I got to the top of the pyramid. And so it kind of been that big, but it looked huge when I was being sucked into it. So your sort of reality and your perceptions are slightly warped in a way as well. Because I remember it being a tiny dot being sucked in, and when I was in the control room, it looked quite small. And then I just saw these 5 shapes. They'd no faces, but I saw they had like a head, and just like golden beings, really. Head, shoulders, arms, various sizes. But to me, I got the impression they were a family. There were 5 of them. And it looked like mother and father and 3 children or something. They looked like a family to me. And there was a white table. I didn't see any insignia anywhere. Somebody asked me that, and I looked around, and I just remember loads of controls, loads of lights, all flashing around. Just like some big starship, you see on a science fiction movie or something. It was like, something like that. And just remember then, one of them, it was one of the smaller ones, put a hand across. It was like a shape, but it was a light. It just came across the table, and I just took the hand, took it, and it just pulled me in, sort of, like, we all went into a big swirl, and it was like I merged with them, with 5 of them, and they all merged together.
What was that all about? And just go back, for the listeners, what did they look like,
first of all? All I remember was don't remember the features when I was looking at them. I have features in my mind later on, but as I was looking at them, they just looked like light beings, just golden light. No. They didn't have eyes, noses, or anything like that, just the shape. Yeah. They had a head, shoulders, hands, and a body, and they looked quite tall. The tallest one was probably about 7 foot or something, about 6 foot, 5 foot, that kind of height. Quite big and overpowering, but I could look at them, and they weren't blinding. It was like the sun in the late afternoon when you can actually look up at it, and it's lovely and golden. It was like that, and I knew them. I knew who they were. They didn't scare me. It was like I was so happy to see them, and the love I felt was just unbelievable from these beings. Like, somebody's asked me, do you think it was artificial? Because they can't implant artificial. I don't think it wasn't that kind of experience.
Because a lot of people who've got implants have something what researcher Darryl Sims coins as screen memories, where they present to you a pleasant reality, but something entirely different is going on under the surface. What I'm interested in, Marie, is the other point that you made, where you said you were sucked into them, you took hold of their hand, and you were dragged in like a whirlpool effect into something. Yeah.
It was like we joined together, and I joined with them. Oh, that was just, what it's like, I was sucked in and I suddenly knew everything that they knew. The whole universe just opened up. It was just, I can't explain it. It was just absolutely amazing. It was just amazing. It's like your head explodes, you've got this burst of everything, you suddenly know everything, and I was so happy, and then suddenly it's like you're back and it's whoop, and you've forgotten everything. It's oh my God, that was, how can you explain that?
Unexplainable, that feeling which is unexplainable of what we knew as ancient men and women, which we have now forgotten. I would coin their phrase. It seems to me that more darker forces on this planet have gone to a lot of time, trouble and efforts to that experience that you talk about, to mask that experience from normal society, what you've described. Any thoughts on that?
Do you think? I think there's, I don't know what's going on, to be honest. Why are they hiding everything, first of all? There's some big secret. It's getting ridiculous now. What is this big secret? Maybe people can't handle it. A lot of them can't, but if they started slowly drip feeding it, like when Roswell happened and drip feed a little bit, we'd be all used to it by now. It'd be common knowledge. So there's obviously something covert going on that they don't want people to know about, because it'll just create panic. And maybe they don't need to know. It's something that they're working on that's going to come out in the next generation or 100 years. So why would people need to know?
The thing is, I suppose, Marie, in the course of your experiences with this, and even in the course of my experiences, why are these intelligences, it's all very nice being taken by the hand, being given all this, but they're a bit drip, and they're a bit hidden. They're a bit evasive, these things in the UFOs. They're not quite giving us the full picture. And when they do, I feel that they give us some disturbing images of the future to come. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, because I've had the images myself of the Earth being destroyed. So, I don't know. Do you think it's the same beings giving this information? There seems to be, because I think the Greys are probably a little bit mischievous, and maybe they're the ones that are trying to bring this false agenda and frighten people and all the rest of it. And they're the ones that are doing the damage.
To go back into the intelligence world and the Department of Defence, who were looking at all this in Linda Moulton Howe's High Strangers.
They're probably working for the government.
I've seen something on YouTube that says you're working for the government, Marie, which is the most moronic thing I've ever heard. In fact, I had somebody from Amsterdam tell me that I'd actually piloted an aircraft over my house to make it look like a UFO. Anyway, that's another story.
I saw something else, I was the Antichrist, and I've got the mark of the beast and That's why I'm coming forward and opening myself up like a guinea pig for everyone to see. Wouldn't I be underground hiding somewhere and doing my covert little plans and things like that instead of putting myself in the public?
Certainly would. And the thing is that they formed before Majestic 12 was formed. There was something called the Collins elite who reached this. I'm going to have Nick Redfern on the show. Who's going to come on and talk about the Collins elite and this elusive code word that we've been trying to hunt called Loftus-Burt, because in documentation referring to the Collins elite, there's always this reference to Loftus-Burt says, Loftus-Burt thinks, Loftus-Burt this, that, the other. Loftus-Burt appears to be some sort of code word, and it all seems a bit odd. Actually, for the listeners' interest, there's also a thing to do with I'm ringing up a guy next week who's meant to be involved with the Majestic organisation, who's telling me about my file that they've got on me. Unbelievable. That'll be interesting.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
ask them about mine because they've got on me.
Yes, I will actually. I might actually do that for the bloody hell of it. I will. I'll mention your name. Do we have a file on you? And we'll see, because surely, if your father-in-law's worked for Syrian Intelligence, oh my.
Oh God. Well, I've had my phone tapped. Yeah. So it's getting ridiculous. Like, even my mother is like, don't talk, I can hear them, don't talk. My mother, she's 77, you know. She can even hear them on the line. It's ridiculous.
You see, the thing is with the Collins elite is they twigged that there was this something called non-human entities coming in. They actually sussed out that due to the workings of occult magic and all this, somebody somewhere were performing rituals that were opening portals that were letting in UFOs. But the thing is that the question with all this is this ancient force that I'm talking about that I've witnessed as an experiencer has been here for thousands of years. The question is not so much does it exist, but the question is why is it existing and what is it doing further? And that's very worrying, considering that it appears to be, coining the new age phrase, as some sort of, it's feeding off fear. Whatever it is, appears to fearmonger. So there is the distinct possibility that all kinds of visions of doom are downloaded into us experiences just to panic us, shock us. Yeah.
See, the thing is, I don't even think they have to download. I think it just takes a news report for people to panic and get into that mindset. I mean, I've seen it, but you can see by the comments about me, it only takes one person to say something and everyone jumps on, oh yeah, I agree. Like with Joanne being a reptilian. I mean, everyone, I saw the eyes, But if they'd have said Joanne is an angel, people have gone, yeah, she was lovely, I remember. So it just takes one person to start off something really stupid and ridiculous.
Are you some sort of bitch from hell, or why do you get all the grief?
I didn't realise I was getting grief.
On the forums, it appears you are the topic of conversation with people, and I think you're actually very. I just think you're very brave, because you did have a family issue as well. And just very briefly touching on that, was that ET related as well? With your daughter?
Which one are you talking about?
Related?
There's something very strange going on there as well. I'll actually read you, because I had the inquest 2 days after.
About it, don't worry. Are you happy? All right,
no, that's fine. But I just want to read you the judge's summing up, because it's very strange. Oh, actually. Oh, sorry. It's gone a bit dark. Okay. This is from my solicitor. So he says, in short, the verdict was suicide, and I paraphrase from my notes the narrative to the verdict as follows. Gina Lucy Kayali died on 2nd November 2012 at West Kensington Court. Having heard the evidence listed today, I have come to the following conclusions. She died following a period of increasing psychotic distress, a period of unusual illicit drug use, and an unusual relationship with a boyfriend. I have heard from Mrs. Kayali and I have heard from others speak out on her behalf, and she is clearly a very caring mother. She did all she could under the circumstances presented. Gina was of a desperately unusual sound of mind and in a desperately destructive relationship. So in 3 sentences, the word unusual, psychotic distress, and there was only 4 from what his boyfriend did to her. So we were trying to get an open verdict so we could pursue, and we should have got an open verdict with the evidence that was presented, but no, he gave a verdict of suicide. So it's going to make things a bit harder. So her boyfriend was even exempted from coming to the inquest, and he said he was sick and he's going to be sick for the foreseeable future, so we couldn't postpone it. And I've been banned from getting my own phone bill, oddly enough. The police basically lied said on the stand and said, because her boyfriend called her 10 minutes before Gina died, basically, and they're saying he didn't, that the last call came from my house from Gina, and that's not true. So I couldn't get you can't get a copy of your incoming calls, you can only get the outgoing one, so it has to be the police. And they don't actually get a bill. They pretend they get a bill. I thought there was a bill, and I'm trying to get a copy of this bill. Then they told me, no, it's not a bill. It comes from a Central Investigations Unit. They pick up. I don't know how that's done. So I said, well, when my solicitor was saying this boyfriend of my daughter's had over 5 or 6 numbers. So my solicitor was saying, well, have you looked for all numbers, or were you just checking for one number specifically? And she got all flustered and started flipping through papers. So we knew straight away she hadn't been looking for any other number. She was specifically looking for one number. And the judge told my solicitor to stop harassing. He said, she's answered that question, but he pushed her a little bit, and he was told off several times. So I've tried to get a copy of my bill now after the inquest. I still can't. I was told I could get everything now, so I applied to the judge, the police. She said, no, I can't. Apply to the judge. I wrote to the judge, no, you can't. And I said, well, why can't I? It's over. Why won't you give me a copy of my bill? They're refusing. There's a Rule 23 on it now, because it proves he called my daughter 5 minutes before she died. Right. And they all lied about it. They won't give it to me.
In the process of Marie, who are you really? You've been involved. You had a family who are involved in the intelligence game. You've had an MOD clearance. You've been involved in deep UFO experiences, including implants. You've witnessed corruption, what is possibly corruption regarding your daughter. Have you been harassed by a mysterious government agency like I have?
Never directly. Never directly. I do get a lot of bad luck and things happen because all my post goes missing. Everything goes wrong. I just have so much hassle with stupid things, So it's all indirect with me, just gives me things. But I've never had anyone approach me, or I have been followed a couple of times, but I don't even look anymore. I don't care, to be honest. I say what I want on the phone. I don't care. I don't get paranoid. I've never been paranoid, and people think I should be paranoid, but I just don't. I don't care. They've heard it all before. If they're listening to my calls since 1983, they know me inside out. They've heard me. They know what I'm doing online. So why hide it? Why be sneaky and get paranoid? Who do you think
they actually are, in your opinion?
It's obviously the government. It's obviously the government, and there is this sort of seems to be this negative, horrible force that can act and do things really quickly, which they probably have got some sort of alien intervention there.
Are you a fan of UFO disclosure then? Do you think that UFO disclosure is the way forward? Are you an advocate of UFO disclosure, of getting it all out in the open?
Oh yeah. It just drives me crazy that they have the cheek to decide what we should know and we shouldn't know. Especially with ancient history, with everything. I think we're all humans on this planet, and everything here is for everybody, and we all have a right to know whatever is going on. I don't think they should keep anything from the people.
No, indeed not. But what I'm interested in is currently, for the listeners, can you describe where you're at with your research now? Because you have sent me some information that you didn't want me to comment on it, and I won't do unless you wish to. But do you want to give an update to the listeners as to where you are currently? Because things have certainly kicked off since your appearance on that Channel 4 programme.
I had all the stress for a while and dealt with all that. But, I want to take the scientific route now. I'm not interested in UFO researchers anymore, and I want scientific research with evidence, things that can be proven. So I'm working with a couple of professors at the moment, and hopefully, work from there, looking for a grant to look into it further and really treat it like as a forensics, like a forensic study, and take it apart bit by bit, scrutinize everything, and to try and build a big picture. But the thing is, with this subject, subject, you've got to concentrate in one area, because, as you know, you end up going into archaeology, religion, politics, everything else, and it's so vast, and you've got to, if you want to study and research something, I think you've got to pick one area. So they're picking the area of alien abduction, I think, and concentrating on that. So David Jacobs is involved, Dr. David Jacobs is involved.
Right, that's a new announcement for the listeners there from you, isn't it, in public, Marie, that I think, is it not, that, yeah?
Well, yeah, the doctor I'm working with is working with him, and they've been working together for a while, and so they're, I'm sort of going to be working with them now and trying to get some further information, and I think I'm a good case study, to scrutinise and examine. So, I have been away for a few days and, got a lot out and, trying to get the whole story and find out. So really it is starting from day one and picking every little thing that I can remember, everything that happened, and just trying to get a big picture. And this is being done for a few people around the world, and so we can get sort of maybe some statistics together, just to find out what actually is going on. It needs to be done forensically now, I think, and scientifically, and not relied on dreams and what I think is happening. It needs to be actually done properly for us to get anywhere, to get further. So I'm taking that route. I recommend,
Marie, the book Hair of the Alien by Bill Chalker, where they did some forensic analysis on a builder in Cyprus, and what happened. Well, he wasn't in Cyprus, he was in Australia, but he was Cypriot. Anyway, he awoke to discover that, to his horror, that down below there was a blonde piece of hair wrapped around where it shouldn't be, where it shouldn't have been. Yeah,
I've heard of that, yeah.
He went and did a full forensic DNA test on it, and the results were startling, absolutely startling. Although you won't see any mainstream media report that, it was absolutely startling. And so one wonders, they did a DNA test on you, didn't they, for the Channel 4 thing, I think, but...
Oh, it was a ridiculous DNA test. There were various degrees where you could find out. This was just a basic mother and father. You have a mother, you have a father. Who they are, you would know. So that's what it was, really. Yeah, you've got a mother, you've got a father. So it was a £99 test. It was ridiculous. It shouldn't have even been put in there. It was irrelevant and ridiculous. But I would have gone further, but they didn't want to.
When you've gone further into it currently where you are now, what have you discovered so far?
I haven't really discovered anything yet, because it's all talking at the moment and building up a picture and sort of getting all the information and all the evidence that I have, and just getting all that together for us. But it's going to be an ongoing thing, taking a while.
Or a film, perhaps, do you think?
Well, it'll lead to some answers, hopefully. That's what I'm hoping to get. So the book or the film is not even in my in my head at the moment. But I'm
good on you, girl.
Just trying to get some answers.
Good on you. That's what we're all trying to do. I was going to ask you another remarkable question. It's gone completely out of my head. Oh yes, that was it. I'm interested to know. This week, for example, Marie, I know with me, my mind is subjected to a constant barrage of a collective subconsciousness that is just off the wall. I'd like to know, and I'm sure the listeners would as well, during the course of this week, for example, what experiences have you had? Could you, in your world of the unknown, of high strangeness?
I've just had a really nice week, actually. I've been away in Oxford, and nothing strange has happened to me the last few days. Now I've had a really nice, relaxing few days down at a lovely hotel in Oxford, and only came back last night. And nothing strange whatsoever. I've had a lovely few days.
I'm glad to hear.
Well, actually, so I've been talking about my experiences, with this doctor, that I'm going to be working with. So that was like a little bit of therapy, and it's great to get out of London as well. And he's such a lovely person. It's just lovely to be able to talk. And so we are getting my story together. So probably while I'm talking to him and getting everything together, there will be a book at the end of this. So I can just, because I am getting everything. It's going to get every single thing out, everything I can remember. And plus the regression. As I said, David Jacobs coming over in October. So I'm hoping, we're trying to set up some regression with him. But I am meeting, and so if he has time, he will do them. Because he is training the doctor that I'm going to be having the regression.
So when you say a doctor, do you mean a medical doctor? Is that who you're liaising?
Yeah, he's a doctor.
Okay, well, what's his opinion of it then so far today?
His opinion of which area? Sorry,
your experiences and this, that, because you.
Oh, it's taken very seriously, yeah. That's what we're saying. They're going to take it from a scientific point of view now and really look into what's happening, because they know it's happening. We all know this is a reality, and it's finding out why and what's the future holding, what it means to humanity for the future.
Channel 4. What did they think?
Oh, yeah, they're aware of that. They said, well, no, I don't think any proper professionals take these lie tests seriously, because your body does react and it will jump all over the place. So you're not going to get an accurate reading. And he refused to show me mine anyway. We couldn't get any written things from him. I think it was all over the place, and I don't think there could have been an accurate conclusion to that.
I think you've been very brave, Marie, in coming on the show, because it took me, dear listeners, nearly about 2 weeks, roughly, to persuade you to come on the Tony Topping show here on Planet X. It took me about, I think it was about that, wasn't it? Because you really had been hammered. You really were very untrusting, weren't you, up there?
Yeah, see, it's really strange how people can affect you, because I do get a lot. I have had a few sort of harassing emails and things, and it is horrible the way people can affect you, but it didn't affect me for long, a couple of days, and I wasn't angry the first couple of days, so I make a couple of comments. Well, that's as far as my anger and revenge or anything goes. I get a couple of snotty comments out, and that's it. I move on. So, I don't attack people or send them malicious viruses, or regardless of what's being said. I haven't got time for that.
I just hope, Marie, that it all goes well for you, and I hope that you can come back onto the Tony Shopping Show and give the listeners an update. What I'm going to do next is I will play a clip of Whitley Strieber speaking to a former National Security Agency scientist regarding implants. But it really has been lovely chatting to you, and thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah,
is there anything else you'd like to mention or chat about before we wave goodbye? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
So everybody, I've got a list here. I've got a hit list. Just that I'd like to say to people that they shouldn't be so quick to just take one person's word for things and just automatically assume that's correct. They have to really look at the evidence and make sure that what they're believing is actually real, and they're not, because there's a lot of false stuff out there, as we know. I'd say 95% of everything out there is really ridiculous and over the top. So you have to do your research before you believe stuff. If you want a real picture and stop just believing. People are just doing videos left, right and centre, and they do it for the views. And, you get people saying, why are they making these, hoaxes and this? Because if you look at the views, it's got 10 million, they're making money, So this is what it's all about now, people making money with this ridiculous information, and people are believing it.
Marie, there's one top UFO researcher, I won't name him, he's written several books, he can't afford a laptop. He's written a book which I won't mention his name, but he's written a book which is probably the most technical book I've ever read about UFOs and such. Like, he currently, when I spoke to him, he'd already made $500 for it. He can't afford to buy a laptop. He couldn't afford to get a laptop, which I find shocking. So I think if anybody thinks we're going to be in this for mega bucks, the only people who are making money probably are the production companies who attempt to exploit us experiences with, don't they?
Yeah, no. Nobody makes money. How can you make money? If I was going to do a book, I'd be doing an e-book and sending it out free anyway. I'm not going to, be charging £25, £30 a book. It'll be an e-book, and it'll be for information and to educate the public. I'm not going to make money out of it.
I have to run mine as a commercial operation, because that's the only option I've got now. Due to all that's gone on with me, it seems to be the only option I have. I know of a horror story that was told by a guest of mine from a few months back, called Chad and Alta, and they were experiencers from New Orleans who were stood on a street corner and got abducted, and they were telling me that they went to a very big named UFO researcher who said she could help them. They handed over their $400 to her. She proceeded to go through stuff and hypnotise them. Then she took all that information, changed their names, and sold it as a book online, but changed their names. So, I think the thing is, in our point of view, in our game, with our intellectual property and all that's happened to us, we have to be careful.
Yeah, well, that's one thing I've learned, and I try to take the positive from things, and even though I was in a horrible situation, I've actually learned a lot from it, because I'd never trust the media again, ever. I was a bit gullible. I'd never do anything again with the media, to be honest. And so I've learned a lot, and this is what I try to do, take the lessons, even though it was horrible. But I'm working on a few little things myself, and little tests, and I've got a little idea of what they could be doing.
Back on the Tony Topping Show here on Planet X and update us. Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Tony. Goodbye.
This is Whitley Strieber with kind permission from his website unknowncountry.com, and here he is explaining, or rather a former scientist who obviously, who rather, well, I find it absolutely bizarre really, indicates he was involved with the National Security Agency, starts to talk to Whitley about implants, which is something what Marie is obviously trying to find the truth about. So with kind permission of unknowncountry.com, this is what Whitley and his guest had to say about alien implants, and it is very, very interesting because implants cause some very bizarre effects and blowback on the individual who's got them inside them. Here we go.
We have implants in various people that are emitting signals, and some are not emitting detectable signals, or I would say, are not emitting detectable signals. Now, you've said that you think that these signals may be a side effect of a power system. So, what would the power system be doing? What is it doing? What is it generating power for?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Whitley, and I don't know the answer, but I am concerned about this. When let's assume that all this is correct, and I believe it is. I believe that this is extraterrestrial implants, and what purpose are these for? Why are these individuals coming here, apparently, putting implants in people, to include naval intelligence officers, apparently, and American scientists and ordinary citizens? And what are they doing with these devices? It could be mind control in part, as you say. These devices, scalar fields, can do, these things can put out a lot of power. You think, well, it's just a tiny little thing. But they could put out maybe 300, 400 watts of power, scalar fields, and change. You wouldn't know it because they run cool. That's the property of these devices that use this scalar physics, that they don't get hot. For instance, Dr. Thomas Henry Moray once had a unit that put out 50,000 watts. It didn't get hot. The more power you demanded of it, the cooler it ran, because of the fact that it was emitting a negative energy scalar waves to make up for the fact that it was generating positive energy. So it could run cool. You won't know it. Now, this scalar waves, what do they do to human consciousness? And if the extraterrestrial material, extraterrestrial material, and it's emitting those scalar waves, it may be affecting your sense of time too. So you can have time slippage and
Good Lord. Okay, I'm sorry. We've got a really interesting conversation here today, because he just blew me away. And I'll tell you why. Let me read something, if I may, that I sent to a person who is very interested in time slippage yesterday. I sent her this email. All right. Dear Starfire, I have had 2 time slips recently, one yesterday, one today. This is a couple of days ago now, June the 14th. On June the 13th, I saw an article on the BBC News website, June the 12th, quote, evidence that French plane broke up in the air. Went to click on the link. It was no longer there. And this literally was 1 second to another. This has happened to me before. Then the next morning, I opened the calendar section of the LA Times and saw an ad for the new Woody Allen movie, and said to Ann, great, the new Woody Allen movie has opened. And we laughed about Larry David, who was in it, being funny. A second later, I glanced down. The ad was gone. Gone. Now, this happens to me not every day, but certainly once every 2 or 3 months, and twice in a row is fairly unusual. These are time slips.
Oh, yeah.
And so go on now and talk a little bit about this, because I'm absolutely fascinated, of course.
Well, if you're receiving radiation from a piece of material that has the different laws of physics from an older part of the universe, the electromagnetic coupling constant that is involved in the emission of the electromagnetic energy operates on a different time scale. So basically what happens is that it can move you into kind of a time warp. Your internal clock may be running fast. You'll have something will happen. You'll have very little recollection of what happened, and maybe 2 hours you'll check a clock somewhere and you'll find 2 or 3 hours have gone by, and you don't know where it went to, and you have very little recollection of what happened, because basically you've got a conflict here. There are two different laws of physics: the laws of physics of the extraterrestrial material, which is emitting a radiation, and the laws of physics that we have here on the rest of the Earth. It's a little difficult to explain, but basically it has to do with the age of the universe. These extraterrestrials and the extraterrestrial material presumably come from an older part of the universe. The laws of physics are a little different there. The electromagnetic coupling constant is weaker, and therefore the time is different. So if you encounter the fields from an electromagnetic device employed by these extraterrestrials, you're moving into your body is moved into their time. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is running on its own time. What seems maybe a couple hours passed in everybody else's time, and you're in a dream zone, and you come back, and it seems inconsequential, as if nothing happened. Then later you start having recollections of about what did happen during those 2 hours, and it's sometimes hard to recall. But basically, we're talking about these extraterrestrials operating on different time scales. Their material, the laws of physics aren't the same. The isotopic ratios won't be the same because the electromagnetic coupling constant has weakened in the older parts of the universe, and so that's basically the idea then behind the time slippage associated with the emissions or any UFO encounters. Things.
Taking you beyond the frontiers of high strangeness, at St Anne's-on-Sea, at the Community Centre, St Albans Road, on the 21st of September 2013, a psychic remote viewing workshop. By popular request, a one-day course on psychic remote viewing based on the techniques of the spy agencies of the Cold War is presented for you. Participants conduct an actual target session and deeply explore the techniques pioneered by the major players in remote viewing. The day includes looking at that rare information pioneered by Russian remote viewers in understanding the cosmos. Tony Topping has nearly 30 years of knowledge in dealing with UFOs and psychic espionage. He has appeared for major broadcasters from ITV to Channel 5 News. And adding further fascination to events, our special guest will be taking attendees into the fascinating world of the human aura and first steps into stereo viewing, which peers into the spiritual realm of the self using photographic technology. All attendees will receive a CD-ROM of information packed with documents on remote viewing and aura research. It's unbeatable value at a cost of £30, including refreshments. Concessions for low incomes are available. Just email Tony, opsufo@hotmail.com. Tickets are available from psychicrvevent.eventbrite.co.uk. That is psychicrvevent.eventbrite, the word bright, spelt BRITE.co.uk. Come and join us for a fantastic day.
Planet X. Strange goings on. greatest paranormal show on radio.
All this stuff that it's used to protect us and all this kind of things, but there is something out there that is completely unaccountable, and that is the use of mind-invasive technology, which is also deployed upon an unknowing population. Nobody's safe from it. Whoever the people are who stalk me, and this is information in the public domain, they acted in an overt fashion. So before we get some talking head espionage smart-ass coming out in the media going, oh, no, oh boy, they do it covertly, wouldn't want to do that. These people were doing it overtly. They were quite bold, quite brassy at letting you know you were being observed, which has often happened to people who are doing UFO research. Oddly enough, people do get harassed who are doing this, and that is... It's worrying that people are not accountable. Very worrying indeed on this. I was, for example, what happened to me when this technology was deployed on me is that I was awoken from sound effects of guns. I was being screamed at on a daily basis, screamed at, woken at 3 or 4 in the morning and being screamed at into the head. And I believe strongly that this was developed by an advanced weapons platform that has been tested upon me and maybe others. And it generates a living hell beyond people's comprehension. And this is the worry. This is the concern for me, that there is something lurks out there that is completely unaccountable doing this. I had phone calls. I received unmarked helicopters that film me. And, there does appear to be a cabal of people who are running riot involved in these activities, and it's corrupt. I was waiting for Mr. Snowden to blow the whistle on this, but that didn't happen. It is a fine example of compartmentalisation. People who work within these agencies probably are unaware at certain levels what goes on. I think one has to question if such people, in order to be involved in the activities I've witnessed, are psychopaths, to deploy technology on people of this nature. And let us be correct about this. There's a famous report, I've forgotten the gentleman's name, he was a United States Navy officer who discovered this was going on and ended up committing suicide. Highly dangerous. The worrying thing of the National Security Agency, there is no doubt in my mind that, we have to have these checks and balances against terrorism, against cyber threats from other nations. That is there. It's a real threat. I've looked at it, I've studied it, it's quite present. The thing with this is, with the NSA, for example, is that nobody, regardless of rank or office, is entitled to know national security information. So that means then that you could actually have a black project empire that remains at large, free from scrutiny, and appears to just do what it does what it wants. I know the US Senate, people in the US Senate have commented that there is a military-industrial complex with its own accountability, with its own checks and balances, that completely ignores the democratic process. So if you picture me as a member of the public being selected by a special group of individuals within the intelligence apparatus, a very deep, shadowy one at that, I'm followed, I'm watched, my phone becomes intercepted, I've probably got no warrant on it, there's no legal request probably to do this, and they developed this weapons platform that invades the mind of the individual, which happened to me between 1999 and roughly 2003, and they, you're instructed remotely when to wake up, when to go to the toilet. They experiment with sleep deprivation and make your life a living hell. Under overt surveillance, you wouldn't recognise them as unordinary people. They blend in very nicely, all that kind of thing. But it was there, it was present, and it's a very great worry indeed as to where the checks and balances lie in all this. Not only that, what is interesting to note for the listeners' interest is that the Russians, Russian intelligence especially, during the Cold War, had a special service unit called Section 5. Now, Bulgarian intelligence also had a unit called Section 5, which I think was responsible for the umbrella poisoning in London of a diplomat. But this other unit that I think is in Chapman Pincher's research was specialists in kind of like levelling conspiracy theory at the West, cranking up conspiracy at the West. The more bizarre stories about what Western governments and even Israeli governments were doing, the better. So the more bizarre it was, the better. So we can see that there has probably been some bizarre goings on in that, as somebody has rightly said to me, when they interrogated Mr. Snowden, they'll have got every bit of information they required out of him. There wouldn't have been any lofty ideals from them. They would have interrogated him, and that there is the distinct possibility that they're played. So the gentleman who was detained is played. There's data that wants to be in the public domain, and it's quite simply not for a lofty ideal to change things from one point of view. It's actually to smear another intelligence service, and they'd never wear that. They'd never put that information in the public domain. They'd just never wear it. But it is worrying that there is a whiter than white, rose-coloured spectacle kind of look out there from media commentators regarding the intelligence services and what they do and who they are accountable to, because they're a rum lot. Things can get pretty nasty with them. Even as an ordinary citizen, you can be watched by them, and that, I feel, is very worrying in a democratic society. So really, when push comes to shove with all this, and in view of what's happened to me, I think that we must see more of this in the public domain, of wanting them to be accountable after what has gone on. It's been a living nightmare for me. It really has with them, and it's important that this is now in the public domain and is seriously looked at. There is a former health minister from Finland who was also targeted. Numerous people will probably step forward and say that they were targeted as well by a very bizarre technology that, as I stress, goes beyond the normal tapping of the phone and interception of email, and that really, in some cases, may not be normal if you've got a corporate entity looking at this data for financial gain. They can probably see the behaviour of the economic behaviour of the whole country and know just how far to push people economically for maximum return. That's an element of sinister intelligence gathering that I would strongly object to indeed. Anyway, it's Planet X. This is the Tony Toppings Show, and it's over now to our guest. If you want to contact me, I'm Tony, opsufo@hotmail.com. Hunting the UFO Mystery Adventures into the Unknown is a thought-provoking day presented to you on Saturday the 9th of November 2013 at the venue of St. John's Church Hall, Settle, BD20. And that's a very different viewpoint from my world and what I've witnessed, where I was overtly followed by some goon squad. That what is troubling about all that is I got the phone calls and I got followed, etc., etc. What is troubling about that is the fact that there is no accountability or oversight with these individuals, and that is quite worrying. I find that quite worrying. And our security services in the UK are probably quite small compared to that of other nations. So what I talk about is a very different world from, so I say, the field officer on 29,000 a year. John Le Carrier reflected, I know, on a YouTube video that a field officer is a high-pressure employment. It's certainly not a nice job to do, and you've got to get a sense of balance before we start going into what I'm talking about. Now, I speak at conferences regarding my experiences, dear listener, and one of my subjects is paranormal espionage. I've had to study that. It's a very unique field because I needed to understand what was going on with me. And, people will wander over, they'll chat, and they'll say that they were involved in this and that and the other on behalf of the government. And that certain government departments have to hit the kill switch on their networks due to cyber attacks from China. China, for example, China and other foreign powers do have cyber threats that do go for the United Kingdom for the jugular. And there's, I was told on the QT that a certain, Whitehall or whatever you want to call it would hit the kill switch because they had them coming in. It's very interesting to note at long last that the UK IT infrastructure by a certain company had links to Chinese state security. And that's very interesting because if we are intercepting people's emails to prevent us from terrorism, who the hell else has access to this information? What is going on? Who has the checks and balances? So it's all very well as saying, oh, well, it's here to defend us against terrorism, but who has the checks and balances? Who are the people who are accountable? Who are the people who oversee what is going on? If the system worked, for example, in terms of gathering intelligence, we wouldn't have Boston, we wouldn't have had Breivik, but there's been some severe shortcomings. The head of Norwegian intelligence was actually fired due to the fact that they failed to detect Breivik, and yet they've got all this signal gathering in intelligence. Is it, in the age of austerity, used as a tool of behaviour analysis? I think is another question that I have to ask as a taxpayer, and I think it is. I think you've got big corporations may have access to this data, and they can work out a lot from it. They can work out the whole behaviour of a country from this analysis. And as Edward Snowden rightly said, he does not want to live in a world where everything I do and say is recorded. It's not something that he's willing to support or live under. And I'm not, frankly. Having seen it all like I have, I'm not willing to live under that banner either. And he says that his sole motive was to inform the public as to that which is done in their name and to that which is done against them. Because we've no idea what is done against us at all as the public. So it's all very interesting. The talking heads in the media come out with all this.
This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X. Planet X. This is Planet X. Planet X.
Broadcasting to you from the studios of Planet X, this is The Tony Topping Show.
It's Tuesday, it's 8 p.m. It's the Tony Topping Show. I am Tony Topping. I am a paranormal Jason Bourne. Very interesting goings-on in the world of the media. Certainly very interesting goings-on to do with Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian and Mr. Snowden and the release of all the secret files there that are going on. And Louise Mensch on Newsnight discussing all this. And I watch with interest these developments. I certainly do, because there is a lot going on from my little world. Certainly a lot going on in watching all this to do with the fact that there is certainly a secret world of intelligence gathering and eavesdropping. And, I think Edward Snowden had the lofty ideal of trying to stop a shadow empire from being built around us that intrudes into our daily lives. Certainly, from where I'm sat, it goes beyond electronic intrusion via computers. Think again, if you thought that there was, that they were tapping phones, etc., which they are doing, that goes on quite routinely, and the tapping of emails in the prevention of terrorism, etc., that does go on. However, there is another level to all this that is out of the public domain that I find very disturbing that has happened to me. And we've got to draw a distinction if any smart ass in the media pipes up about this. We've got to draw a distinction between somebody like me coming out and saying I've been targeted, and then somebody else saying, well, I was targeted by the spies and stuff like that, because it doesn't quite work like that. It's as John le Carre says in his book, it's a very, very different world. The world of, let us say, the field officer on the ground following a terrorist with a rucksack on his back, or following a target, is high stakes, high pressure. It's very real. It does happen. It does go on. Well, you put this on the internet, it's mute. The response to it is mute because people get uncomfortable about it. They don't like talking about it, and the first thing that happens is the messenger is shot. But it's very true. This does happen. In the Bourne films, a fine example of this is David Webb. I call myself, as part of my Planet X radio show, I call myself a paranormal Jason Bourne, which is perhaps what I am. It probably sums it up rather nicely. But in those films, he came across an operation called Treadstone. Treadstone was a top-secret project. Oddly enough, in the film, I've forgotten which Bourne one it was, but in one of the films, there was the Treadstone operation uncovered by the Guardian newspaper. How interesting that is. And that was using advanced high-tech mind invasive techniques to produce a Manchurian candidate. I think that I've been witness to some very strange goings-on regarding all this. I think there was definitely some sort of top-secret program going on around me with this technology. An innocent member of the public, myself, is selected. And, I think it's time that these revelations, the next level, beyond the phone tapping and the emails, nobody is safe from this, and I don't think that they would want it too much in the public today, but to me, it's an uncountable empire. It's certainly sinister beyond George Orwell, dear listener, and I know I've witnessed it firsthand. I think it's time the public was told, I really do. There's a lot that has gone on with me that I don't talk about, but I think it is time for those who know to step forward for what is going on here, because there's a bit of corruption and skullduggery going on and an accountability. So we will get people like Louise mentioned on Newsnight and other people talking away about this, little knowing of the hidden, very real corrupt and dark environment that would even shock George Smiley if he was alive. And it's extremely sinister and extremely worrying that this goes on beyond the public domain and is not reported. This is the Tony Topping Show. And recently, coming back from, not coming back, I was coming back from a talk in, where was it now? Birmingham. And we had a film company turn up, as I will describe later, from a company called Filterview Films. And it is there that I explain, for the first time ever on camera, the overt stalking that went on with me, or what is called gang stalking in our game. Our game. What a title. Anyway, yes, what a book. So we discussed this with the film company, and what is interesting to note about all this is that these people who act outside the democratic process within the national security apparatus had unmarked helicopters filming me, and I covered that in my little short documentary piece when they came to film me, about the fact that we had an unmarked helicopter break every air regulation in the book. Looked like something out of a James Bond movie filming me, and that was an AS555. Now that information is in the public domain, and the pilot looked at that and said that it was the most unusual helicopter that he had seen, because it was an AS555. It bristles with camera gear and surveillance stuff, and it was flying around me. They were filming me, I was filming them, and so the story goes. But these people who were following